Imagine the darkest place on Earth. Not a room without light, not a tunnel. The truly darkest place. A place where the sun has never reached, where the water weighs so much it would crush your bones before you could process what was happening, where the temperature drops below freezing, and the ocean only remains liquid because the salt won't allow it to do otherwise. Now imagine that in that place, something has been alive for 500 years. That is not a metaphor, it is not an exaggeration, it is the reality of the Greenland shark. And once you know what this animal is capable of, what it carries within, what it endures, and what it represents, you will never be able to think about nature in the same way again. The Greenland shark inhabits the waters of the North Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean. It is the largest fish in those waters and one of the largest sharks on the planet. It can reach up to 7 meters in length and weigh close to 1,000 kilograms. In size, it approaches the great white. But in everything else, they are creatures from completely opposite worlds. The great white is speed, it is sharp instinct, it is the perfect explosion of millions of years of predatory evolution. The Greenland shark is something else entirely. It moves at 2 kilometers per hour, not during moments of rest. Always. That is its speed. 2 kilometers per hour is the pace of a child taking their first steps. It is so slow that for a long time scientists assumed it was nearly impossible for this animal to hunt live prey. And yet it does. But we will get to that. The first thing that catches your attention when you see a Greenland shark beyond its size are its eyes. They are pale, whitish, almost lifeless. Fishermen who have had the misfortune of crossing paths with one always describe them the same way. They look like the eyes of something that has been dead for a very long time. And there is a reason for that. There exists a parasitic copepod called Omatocoita elongata, a tiny crustacean that has found the perfect habitat in the cornea of the Greenland shark. It latches directly onto the shark's eye and grows. It can reach up to 6 centimeters in length. 6 centimeters hanging from a shark's eyeball, swaying with every movement of the water, like a flag on a mast. What makes this even more disturbing is how frequently it occurs. In a study conducted with more than 1,500 Greenland sharks caught in the waters of eastern Greenland, researchers found the parasite in 98.9% of the animals analyzed, nearly all of them. The damage this organism causes to the cornea is so severe that scientists believe these sharks are, for all practical purposes, blind, barely capable of distinguishing light from darkness, of perceiving blurry shadows where shapes once existed. And yet they are predators. Predators in the fullest sense of the word. How does a practically blind animal survive in one of the most demanding oceans on the planet? The answer lies in the senses that evolution has given it in place of sight. If you could get close to the snout of a Greenland shark and look at it carefully, you would see small pores distributed along the entire head. These are the ampullae of Lorenzini, a sensory system that all sharks possess, but that in this species takes on a critical importance. Those pores are filled with a gelatinous substance that conducts electricity, and inside them are specialized cells that react to the electrical fields generated by living beings. Every heartbeat of a prey animal, every muscle contraction, produces an electrical signal. The Greenland shark detects it. But its most powerful weapon is its sense of smell. Studies on the brain of this species reveal something surprising. In proportion to its body size, it is one of the smallest brains among all sharks. But there is one clear exception. The olfactory bulbs, the brain region responsible for processing smells, are disproportionately large, larger relative to the rest of the brain than in most other shark species. This animal has invested its neurological resources in smell. It can follow a chemical trail through kilometers of black, frozen water with a precision that is difficult to comprehend from our perspective. And so we arrive at the mystery that has most intrigued researchers for decades. The Greenland shark hunts seals. Arctic seals are agile, fast mammals perfectly adapted to the water. If a seal detects the presence of a predator, it can swim away in seconds. Logic suggests that a shark swimming at 2 kilometers per hour should not be capable of catching anything that is not already dead. And yet the stomach contents of Greenland sharks repeatedly prove otherwise. Whole seals, fresh remains, evidence of active hunting. The most widely supported hypothesis currently points to ambush. Seals have a problem in the Arctic. Polar bears dominate the surface of the ice. So on many occasions they choose to sleep floating in the water column below the surface, where they feel safer. But in doing so they remain completely motionless for minutes at a time. And a shark that moves in absolute silence, guided by smell in the darkness, generating no turbulence and producing no sounds to alert its prey, can get close enough for the electrical system to take over in the final meters. It does not need speed, it needs time and silence, and it has more than enough of both. When the Greenland shark attacks, it does so with a dental mechanics that has no equivalent among the great marine predators. Its upper teeth are small and conical, designed to anchor the prey and prevent it from escaping. Its lower teeth are wide, flat, and extremely sharp, capable of exerting a devastating cutting pressure. They work together like the two parts of a precision industrial hole punch. Living beluga whales have been documented swimming with perfectly cylindrical sections removed from their musculature. The stomachs of some Greenland sharks contain fragments with that same characteristic circular geometry. Now there is something that most people do not know about this animal, and it is important. Its flesh is toxic, not because the shark has venom glands or toxic spines. The toxicity is intrinsic to its own biology. It is caused by a molecule called trimethylamine oxide, known by its acronym TMAO. This substance is present in extremely high concentrations in the tissues of the Greenland shark, and when ingested without proper preparation, it metabolizes into trimethylamine, a compound that causes severe intoxication in mammals. Sled dogs that have consumed large quantities of raw flesh develop a series of symptoms that include excessive salivation, vomiting, severe diarrhea, and convulsions. In extreme cases, the intoxication is fatal. But TMAO is not an evolutionary accident. It is the solution. To understand why, you have to imagine what it means to live 2,000 meters deep in near-frozen water. At that depth, the pressure exceeds 200 atmospheres. That is 200 times the weight of the air above the Earth's surface, crushing every millimeter of tissue. At those temperatures, the biochemical processes that sustain life begin to deteriorate. Proteins, which need to maintain a very specific three-dimensional shape in order to function, begin to unfold under the combined effect of cold and pressure. Without protection, cells stop functioning. The animal dies. TMAO is that protection. It acts at the molecular level, stabilizing proteins and the aqueous environment inside cells, neutralizing the destructive effects of pressure and extreme cold. The deeper a marine organism lives, the higher the concentration of this molecule in its tissues. The Greenland shark has some of the highest levels ever recorded in any marine species. What makes it toxic to those who consume it is also exactly what allows it to exist in the most hostile conditions on the planet. In addition, the shark retains high concentrations of urea in its body to maintain osmotic balance in the salty Arctic water. It is the urea that is responsible for that characteristic and intense smell that has made fishermen who have accidentally caught one unable to forget it. In Iceland, there is a traditional preparation called hakarl, Greenland shark flesh fermented for several months to reduce the toxicity to tolerable levels. It is considered one of the most extreme foods in the world. Those who have tried it rarely do so again. This shark is not limited to the depths. Individuals have been recorded at the surface and also at nearly 3,000 meters deep, in what oceanographers call the bathypelagic zone, where sunlight never penetrates and the pressure is crushing in the most literal sense. It can do this because it lacks a swim bladder, the gas-filled organ that most fish use to regulate their buoyancy, and that makes them extremely vulnerable to sudden changes in pressure. Instead, the Greenland shark uses a massive liver, rich in lipids, that gives it buoyancy without the limitations that a gas-filled organ would impose. It can move between the surface and the abyssal depths with a freedom that few animals in the ocean possess. And now we arrive at the heart of all of this. In 1936, a researcher caught a Greenland shark, measured it, tagged it, and returned it to the ocean. In 1952, 16 years later, the same animal was caught again. In that time, it had grown less than 1 centimeter per year. It was a growth rate so slow that scientists began doing the math. If an adult shark 6 meters long had grown at that pace since birth, how many years old would it be? The answer was so implausible that it took decades to be accepted with solid evidence. In 2016, a team of researchers from the University of Copenhagen published a study that transformed what we knew about the limits of animal longevity. They used a technique based on radiocarbon dating of the proteins in the islands, proteins that are synthesized during embryonic development and are not renewed throughout the animal's life. Like a biological time capsule, by comparing the carbon-14 levels of those proteins with the historical records of that isotope in the atmosphere, which experienced notable spikes during the nuclear tests of the 1950s and 60s, the scientists were able to estimate with remarkable precision when each individual had been born. The smallest sharks in the study showed elevated levels of carbon-14. They had been born after the nuclear tests. They were less than 60 years old. But the largest ones told a different story entirely. The biggest shark in the sample had an estimated age of 392 years. with a margin that extended to 512. 512 years. It had been born before the modern concept of Europe as we know it existed, before the Taj Mahal was built, before the French Revolution, before the Industrial Revolution, before almost everything we identify as modern history. The study also established that sexual maturity in this species is not reached until at least 156 years of age, 156 years of life before being able to reproduce for the first time. It is the latest sexual maturity documented in any vertebrate on the planet. The Greenland shark is the longest living vertebrate known on Earth. There is no possible debate. Why does it live so long? The clearest answer has to do with metabolism. An extremely slow metabolism, like the one this species has, generates less oxidative stress, which is the process of accumulated cellular damage that is directly associated with aging. Less oxidative stress means tissues that deteriorate more slowly, organs that hold up longer, a body that ages at a fraction of the speed of other animals. The bowhead whale, also Arctic and slow in metabolism, lives up to 200 years. The Galapagos tortoise, with its reduced metabolism adapted to an environment with scarce resources, reaches between 100 and 200 years. The pattern is consistent. But when scientists sequenced the complete genome of the Greenland shark, they found something nobody expected. Its genome is the largest of any shark analyzed to date. 6.5 billion base pairs, more than double the human genome. And more than 60% of that genome is composed of transposable elements, also known as jumping genes, sequences of DNA capable of moving and reinserting themselves at different points in the genome, which in principle should cause genetic instability and increase the risk of harmful mutations. And yet the longest living of all vertebrates is full of them. The hypothesis that researchers are working with is that the Greenland shark could be hijacking the machinery of these elements to duplicate genes involved in DNA repair, multiplying its capacity to correct the genetic damage accumulated over time. If this hypothesis is confirmed, we would be looking at a longevity mechanism without precedent in the history of biology. Think about it for a moment. Right now, as you breathe, as you read this, as the world moves forward at the speed it does, there are Greenland sharks moving slowly through the darkness of the Arctic that have been alive longer than most of the nations of the world have existed. They have watched empires rise and fall, wars, the birth of technologies that have transformed civilization. They have seen it all without seeing it, in their frozen darkness, guided by smell, covered in parasites at 2 kilometers per hour, without any urgency whatsoever. Nature has been solving problems for billions of years. And sometimes the solution it finds looks nothing like what we would expect. The Greenland shark is proof that life does not always win by being faster, stronger, or more visible. Sometimes it wins by being patient, by being constant, by being almost invisible in the darkness for 5 centuries. Slow, silent, eternal. There is something this animal tells us without words. We live obsessed with speed, with producing more, moving faster, arriving first. The fastest wins, the strongest survives. That is what we have always been told. And then the Greenland shark appears, blind, slow, toxic, with parasites hanging from its eyes, living in the most inhospitable place on the planet, with no predators, with no urgency, with no rush for absolutely anything. And it has been doing it for 500 years. There is no more brutal lesson about what adapting truly means. It is not about being the fastest or the most ferocious. It is about fitting so perfectly into your environment that time stops being a threat and becomes simply something that passes around you. Science is only just beginning to understand this animal. And it is possible, it is not far-fetched to think it, that within its biology there are answers that will one day change what we know about aging and the limits of life. An animal that spent centuries swimming in silence beneath the Arctic ice could be one of the most important keys that nature has left us. And we did not know. Because we never stopped to look at it. While we keep rushing and making noise, somewhere far below the ice, something slow and ancient and almost blind keeps moving through the darkness. As it always has. As it always will.